Welcome to No Sleep Historian. This is not the history they taught you in school. This is the blood beneath the parchment, the rot between the ruins. The past doesn't sleep, and neither do we. Tonight, we'll be diving into the age of the Viking. So grab a snack, get comfy, and fight that urge to sleep. Section 1. Into the North, the Age of Fire and Ice. Surviving the Viking Age isn't about brute strength. It's about knowing when to bow and when to burn. It's about waking up each day to a land that wants you dead and choosing violence before the land chooses it for you. Picture this. It's 845 AD, and you're standing on the windswept shores of what will one day be called Denmark. The sky is the color of old pewter, heavy with the promise of snow that could kill you if it catches you unprepared. The salt spray from the North Sea stings your face like 1,000 tiny knives, and the ground beneath your feet is hard as iron. This is your world. This is where you must learn to survive, or become another forgotten corpse feeding the ravens. The Viking Age spans from roughly 793 to 1066 AD, nearly 3 centuries of fire, ice, and blood. It begins with the sack of Lindisfarne, when Norse raiders descended on the Holy Island like wolves on sheep, and ends at Stamford Bridge, where Harold Hardrada's dreams of conquest died with him in English mud. But forget the Hollywood caricature of horn-helmeted berserkers. Those horns are pure fantasy, dreamed up by opera composers centuries later. Real Viking helmets were simple iron caps, if you were lucky enough to afford one at all. The truth is far more brutal and complex. Survival wasn't just about raiding monasteries and hoisting axes above your head while screaming at the sky. It was about enduring winters that could freeze your breath in your lungs. It was about navigating political rivalries that could end with your throat cut in the night. It was about living by codes so precise and unforgiving that a single misstep could mark you for death. You're born in a longhouse that reeks of wood smoke, animal dung, and human sweat. The roof is made of turf and timber, constantly leaking. Rain doesn't just fall here, it infiltrates, seeping through every crack until dampness becomes a permanent resident in your bones. The floor is packed earth, covered with rushes that grow moldy and must be changed constantly, assuming you can find fresh ones. This isn't a home in any modern sense. It's a shelter, a fortress against the elements, shared with pigs, goats, chickens, and sometimes horses. Your name isn't just your own. It's your bloodline's banner flying in a hostile world. Every action you take either honors your ancestors or shames them. There is no neutral ground. If your great-grandfather was known as Bjorn the Brave, you carry that expectation like a millstone around your neck. If your family is known for cowardice, you must fight twice as hard to earn even basic respect. Names here aren't arbitrary labels. They're prophecies, curses, and promises, all rolled into one. The gods don't watch from some distant Olympus. They sit beside you during storms, their breath in the wind that tries to tear your roof away. They stand with you in battle, whispering strategies or abandoning you to die alone. They visit your dreams, sometimes with wisdom, sometimes with warnings, sometimes with demands that test your sanity. Odin hangs himself from Yggdrasil for 9 days and nights to gain knowledge of the runes. What do you think he expects from you? Comfort, safety. The concept doesn't exist. Every cough that lasts more than a week might herald your death from lung rot. Every feast might be your last before raiders arrive or winter claims you. Every successful harvest might be followed by 3 years of famine. There is no comfort here, no safety net, no retirement plan. There is only survival or saga. And most people don't get sagas. The Norse worldview is cyclical and fatalistic. Ragnarok, the end of all things, isn't a distant threat. It's an inevitable reality. The gods themselves will die. The world will burn. Everything you love will turn to ash. But that doesn't make life meaningless. It makes every moment precious because it's fleeting. You fight not because you can win forever, but because the alternative is surrender, and surrender is worse than death. Weather isn't just inconvenience here. It's an active enemy. Summers that never truly warm your bones. Winters that kill the weak and test the strong. Spring floods that wash away months of work. Autumn storms that sink ships and destroy harvests. You don't live with nature. You survive it, day by day, season by season, year by year. The social structure is fluid but rigid. You can rise through skill, courage, and luck. But you can fall just as quickly through cowardice, bad judgment, or simple misfortune. A farmer's son can become a jarl through prowess in battle. A jarl's son can become a slave through poor choices or bad luck. Nothing is guaranteed except struggle. Welcome to the Viking Age. You won't survive by luck alone. You'll survive by knowing the laws of the North, written in blood, carved in stone, and whispered in the wind that never stops howling across these God-forsaken lands. Section 2. The Farm and the Flame. Daily Life and Survival. You wake up before the sun, if it's even visible through the perpetual overcast that seems permanently welded to the northern sky. During the deepest winter months, the sun rises like a pale ghost around 9 in the morning and dies like a guttering candle by 3 in the afternoon. But sleep follows no civilized schedule here. You wake when the animals need tending, when the fire needs feeding, when your bladder can't wait any longer. Your hands are maps of your survival, cracked from cold, scarred from axes and knives, permanently stained with soot from the forge, blood from butchering, dirt from planting. Every line tells a story of work that never ends. You'll chop wood every day until you die, or someone else takes your axe from your corpse. There's no retirement plan here. You work until you're too old to swing an axe. And then you become a burden your family can't afford to keep. You don't own much, because owning much means having more to lose. A wool tunic woven by women whose fingers are as skilled as any warrior's with a blade. Leather shoes that you've resold so many times, the original hide is just a memory. Maybe a silver armband if your family has been lucky in raids or trading. But that armband isn't jewelry, it's currency, insurance, and status symbol, all wrapped around your bicep. You'll hack pieces off it to pay debts, or buy passage, or bribe officials. Your farm is your lifeline, but it's also your prison. Goats that provide milk, meat, and hide, but need constant watching because wolves hunt in packs. Pigs that can survive on scraps, but will eat literally anything, including human corpses, if you're not careful. Chickens that lay eggs when they feel like it, and die if you look at them wrong. Barley and oats that grow reluctantly in soil that seems more interested in producing rocks than grain. Turnips that taste like dirt but keep you alive when everything else fails. Nothing survives here without constant work. Your house, a longhouse made of timber, wattle, daub, and turf, requires daily maintenance. The turf roof doesn't just leak, it rots, slides off in chunks during storms, and provides homes for mice, insects, and occasionally birds. You're not fighting against entropy, you're in a desperate daily battle with it, armed with nothing but stubbornness and the knowledge that failure means death for everyone who depends on you. Rain doesn't just seep through the sod roof, it finds every crack, every weakness, every poorly fitted beam. During storms, you don't sleep, you bail water, shore up supports, and pray the wind doesn't decide your roof looks like something it wants to relocate to the next fjord over. Mice don't just nest in the hay, they consume it, contaminate it, multiply faster than you can kill them. You sleep with your animals, not out of affection, but because body heat is sometimes the only thing that stands between your children and death by exposure. Women in this world aren't decorative accessories or silent shadows. They run households with the efficiency of military commanders and the ruthlessness of successful merchants. They brew ale that can knock a grown man unconscious or cure his stomach ailments, depending on the recipe. They bake bread from grains they grew, harvested, threshed, and ground themselves. They act as doctors, diagnosing illnesses, setting bones, delivering babies, and sometimes deciding who lives and who dies when resources are scarce. If your father dies in a raid or from illness or in a drunken brawl, your mother doesn't become a helpless widow, she becomes the head of the household. She makes the decisions, manages the farm, arranges marriages, settles disputes, and sometimes leads raids herself. If your husband falls in battle, you don't just mourn, you decide whether to remarry for protection, take over his role, or follow him into the grave. Some women become merchants, traveling vast distances to trade goods. Others become seers, speaking with the gods and predicting the future. A few become warriors, fighting alongside men or leading their own bands. Food is fuel, not pleasure. Boiled meat that tastes like salted leather. Dried fish so hard you could use it as a weapon. Porridge made from barley, oats, or whatever grain you can grind. You chew slowly, not because you savor the flavors, there usually aren't any, but because you've lost teeth to bread baked with sand, grit, and sometimes small stones that weren't properly sifted from the grain. You eat what you can when you can, because famine arrives without warning and stays as long as it wants. A late spring, an early frost, a summer with too much rain or too little, raiders who burn your crops, livestock disease, spoiled grain stores. Any of these can sentence your family to death by starvation. During the worst times, you eat bark soup, grass bread, and anything else that might contain enough nutrition to keep you breathing for another day. The year is divided not into 4 seasons, but into 2 states of existence, growth and survival. Summer means 18-hour workdays, planting, tending, harvesting, fishing, building, repairing, trading, and desperately trying to accumulate enough resources to survive the coming winter. Winter means rationing everything, food, fuel, movement, hope while death stalks your household like a patient predator. Even joy is calculated here. A festival where the mead flows too freely means less alcohol for the lean months ahead. A celebration where too much food is consumed means hunger later. A gathering where young men drink and boast often ends with someone dead over a perceived insult or old grudge. Fun has consequences, and those consequences can kill you. There are no luxuries here, no second chances, no social safety net. Only the endless grind of staying alive one more day, one more season, one more year. And if you're very lucky, if you work hard enough, fight smart enough, and please the gods enough, Maybe your children will have the same opportunity to struggle that you do. Section 3. The laws that bound us: justice, honor, and vengeance. There are no kings in your village, no distant monarchs issuing decrees from golden thrones. There are only oaths that bind like iron chains, and the fee assembly where your community gathers to settle disputes, establish laws, and decide who lives and who dies. The thing isn't a courtroom with robed judges and formal procedures. It's a circle of hard men with long memories and short tempers, meeting in a field or grove considered sacred by local tradition. They carry weapons openly, drink ale while deliberating, and base their decisions on precedent, witness testimony, and sometimes divine signs interpreted by local seers. Justice here isn't blind, it's wide-eyed and watching everything, remembering every slight, every debt, every promise made and broken. If someone kills your brother, they don't disappear into a prison system. They owe you blood, literally. But you don't just grab your axe and start swinging. First, you demand a wurgeld, a man price calculated based on the victim's social status, age, and potential future contributions to the community. A young warrior might be worth 30 silver marks. An elderly thrall might be worth 3. A prominent jarl could be worth 100 or more. This isn't arbitrary. It's survival economics. Every person represents economic value: their labor, their skills, their ability to fight, their potential for reproduction. When someone is killed, that value is lost forever. The wurgeld compensates the family for that loss, while preventing blood feuds that could devastate entire communities. If the killer pays, peace is theoretically restored. If they refuse or can't pay, vengeance becomes not just a right, but an obligation. And you must take that vengeance, or else you're marked as weak. Not just you, but your entire bloodline. Weakness here isn't just personal failing. It's genetic contamination that threatens your family's survival for generations. A man who won't avenge his brother's murder will see his daughters rejected by good families, his sons mocked, his own words given no weight in future things. Honor operates as a currency more valuable than silver. Your reputation determines who will trade with you, fight beside you, marry into your family, or offer you shelter when you need it. If someone calls you a liar in public and you don't respond with violence, or at least a formal challenge, your word becomes worthless. Contracts won't be honored. Deals will be broken. Your family's social status plummets. Disrespect doesn't die with the insulted party. It multiplies like a plague, infecting children and grandchildren. A man branded as coward will see his sons struggle to find wives, his daughters rejected by respectable families, his name spoken with contempt long after his death. This isn't mere social pressure. It's economic warfare that can destroy family lines. False accusations are weapons as deadly as swords. In a society without CSI units or forensic evidence, guilt and innocence are determined by testimony, reputation, and community consensus. If enough people believe you're guilty, then you are guilty, regardless of the truth. A skilled enemy can destroy you without ever drawing a blade, just by spreading the right rumors to the right people at the right time. Legal procedures exist, but they're ritualized combat by other means. Oath-swearing ceremonies where the accused must find a specific number of oath helpers, respected community members willing to swear to their good character. Ordeals by fire, water, or combat where divine judgment supposedly reveals guilt or innocence. Trial by battle where the accused and accuser fight to determine who's telling the truth. based on the belief that the gods won't let the innocent lose. Exile, outlawry, is the ultimate punishment, worse than death because it's death by degrees. An outlaw loses all protection of law. Anyone can kill them without consequence. No one can offer them food, shelter, or aid without becoming outlaws themselves. Not even family members can help without risking their own destruction. You become a ghost in your own homeland, condemned to wander until you die of exposure, starvation, or violence. There are no prisons here because imprisonment is expensive and counterproductive. Why feed a criminal when you can extract compensation, execute them, or exile them? Punishments are immediate and practical. Fines paid in silver or livestock, physical mutilation that marks the offender permanently, or death by hanging, drowning, or being thrown into a pit. The death penalty isn't reserved for murder, theft, adultery, cowardice in battle, breaking sacred oaths, insulting the gods, or even persistent lying can earn you a rope or a blade. Life is hard enough without tolerating people who make it harder through their selfishness or stupidity. Women have legal rights here that would shock people in many other medieval societies. They can own property, initiate divorce, demand compensation for injuries, and even pursue blood vengeance under certain circumstances. A woman who kills her rapist faces no legal consequences. A wife who divorces her husband for impotence, excessive violence, or cross-dressing can reclaim her dowry and remarry. Some women become law speakers, legal experts who memorize the complex oral traditions that govern society. Contracts are sacred because they're witnessed by the gods themselves. Breaking an oath doesn't just invite human retribution, it brings divine punishment. Men who violate their word become cursed, their luck turns sour, their crops fail, their ships sink, their weapons break in battle. The gods remember oath-breakers and mark them for destruction. If you want to survive in this world, you must understand that laws aren't rules. They're weapons as dangerous as any blade, and just as likely to kill you if mishandled. Master them, and you can destroy enemies without bloodshed. Ignore them, and they'll destroy you without mercy. Section 4. The Blade and the Oath. Becoming a warrior. You want to survive the Viking Age, you better learn to fight, because everything else, farming, trading, crafting, even praying, depends on your ability to kill, or at least convince others that you can. Combat isn't just about protecting yourself, it's about protecting your family, your livestock, your crops, your reputation, and your right to exist in a world where weakness is a death sentence. A blade isn't just a tool, it's an extension of your soul, a symbol of your worth, and sometimes the only thing standing between your children and slavery. Training begins before you can properly hold a sword. At 5 or 6 years old, boys learn to wrestle, not for sport but for survival. You discover how to fall without breaking bones, how to use your opponent's strength against them, how to fight dirty when fighting clean means dying. By 8, you're swinging wooden swords, learning proper stances, footwork, and the basic cuts that can separate a man's head from his shoulders. Real weapons training starts around 10. Spear work first, thrusting, parrying, using the shaft to trip or strike, fighting in formation with other spearmen. The spear is the common man's weapon, cheap to make, easy to use, effective in groups. A line of spearmen can stop a cavalry charge or hold off superior numbers indefinitely. Then comes sword work. If your family can afford a blade, swords are expensive. A good one costs as much as several cows. They're not just weapons, but status symbols, family heirlooms passed from father to son, sometimes for generations. Your sword has a name because it's not just metal, it's part of your identity. When you swing Bloodsinger, or Bonebiter, or Widowmaker, you're not just fighting, you're continuing a tradition of violence that stretches back to your ancestors. You learn pain early and intimately. Wooden training swords still leave bruises that last for weeks. Practice spears can crack ribs or break arms if you're careless. Every lesson is paid for in blood, sweat, and tears, literally. But pain teaches you things no gentle instruction can. How to fight through injury, how to ignore fear, how to channel rage into precision rather than letting it blind you. Real combat isn't about strength, it's about speed, leverage, and controlled fury. A smaller, faster warrior can kill a larger opponent by being in the right place at the right time with the right technique. You learn to read body language, to anticipate attacks, to exploit openings that last for fractions of seconds. You discover that footwork matters more than arm strength, that positioning beats power, that staying calm while your enemy loses control gives you every advantage you need. Most warriors don't wear armor because most warriors can't afford it. You fight in a wool tunic, leather belt, thick cloak, and whatever protection you can improvise. Maybe a leather cap if you're lucky, a round wooden shield covered in leather or iron if you're prosperous. If you're wealthy enough to own mail, a shirt of interlocked iron rings, you're either very successful or very dead, because armor like that makes you a target for everyone who wants to take it from your corpse. Your shield isn't just defense, it's a weapon. You can punch with the boss, hook an enemy's leg with the rim, use it to trap their weapon while you stab them with your own. Shield work is an art form, knowing when to present its face, when to angle it to deflect rather than absorb impact, how to use it to create openings for counterattacks. Helmets are rare and precious. Most consist of simple iron caps, sometimes with nose guards, occasionally with mail aventails to protect the neck. The popular image of horned helmets is pure fantasy. Horns would give an enemy something to grab while they're cutting your throat. Real Viking helmets are designed to deflect blows, not make fashion statements. Raiding teaches you the difference between training and survival. You sail with 20 or 30 carefully chosen men, each tested in combat, each trusted with your life. You hit coastal monasteries, trading posts, or isolated farms. You move fast, strike hard, take what you can carry, and leave before organized resistance arrives. Linger too long, and the locals will gather forces, cut off your retreat, and hunt you through unfamiliar territory until you die far from home. The goal isn't heroic single combat, it's efficient violence. You want to kill or capture as many enemies as possible, while losing as few of your own men as you can manage. Dead warriors can't enjoy their shares of the loot. Wounded men slow down the entire group and consume resources better spent elsewhere. Oaths bind you to your warband more tightly than blood ties. You swear loyalty to your jarl or chieftain in formal ceremonies witnessed by gods and men. You promise to stand beside your shield brothers in battle, to share their fate, whether that means victory or death, to avenge them if they fall, and to trust them to avenge you in turn. Breaking such oaths is worse than death, because it destroys not just your reputation, but your soul. Oath breakers become cursed beings, rejected by gods and men alike, doomed to wander as friendless outcasts until they die alone and unmourned. No warrior will stand beside a known oathbreaker. No woman will marry him. No merchant will trade with him. He becomes a living ghost, dead to everything that makes life worth living. Battle fury, berserker gang, is both blessing and curse. Warriors who can enter this trance-like state become nearly unstoppable in combat, feeling no pain, fearing no enemy, fighting with inhuman strength and endurance. But the fury comes with a price. You might attack friends as well as enemies. You remain vulnerable to projectiles and organized tactics. And when the rage passes, you collapse into exhaustion that can last for days. Dying in battle isn't failure. It's the best possible outcome for a warrior. A man who falls with his sword in his hand and enemies dead around him earns immortality in Valhalla, the Hall of the Slain. There, he'll feast with heroes, fight eternal battles, and prepare for Ragnarok, the final conflict that will determine the fate of all existence. But survival doesn't mean living forever. It means dying well, with honor intact, and your name remembered in the stories warriors tell around firelight. That's the only immortality most of us can hope for, and for warriors, it's enough. Section 5. Seawolves. Life aboard a longship. The sea is the Viking's highway to wealth, conquest, and death. Master it, and the world opens like a vein ready to bleed. Fail to respect it, and it becomes your tomb. A longship isn't a cruise vessel, or even a comfortable transport. It's a narrow wooden predator, built for speed, stealth, and terror. 70 feet long, but only 16 feet wide, riding low in the water, like a sleeping serpent, ready to strike. The hull flexes with the waves, rather than fighting them, making these ships incredibly seaworthy, but also requiring constant maintenance. Every plank, every rope, every iron nail represents hours of skilled labor and precious resources. You don't sail alone. You row with 20 to 40 carefully chosen men, each one tested in combat, each one willing to die for the others. This isn't just a crew, it's a brotherhood, forged in salt spray and blood. You've shared food, fought enemies, weathered storms, and pulled each other back from the edge of death. Trust here isn't just emotional, it's practical. When waves are breaking over the bow, and the ship is listing dangerously, you need to know the man beside you won't panic or abandon his post. Rowing for hours, sometimes days, turns your hands into bleeding claws wrapped around rough ash wood. The rhythm becomes hypnotic. Pull, recover, until your muscles move without conscious thought. Your back aches constantly. Your shoulders burn. Salt spray stings your face raw, and the constant wind cracks your lips until they bleed. But you don't complain, because complaining marks you as weak, and weak men don't survive long voyages. Sleeping means curling up under a shared sail or sealskin cover, trying to find enough warmth to rest without freezing. If it rains, you're wet. There's no getting around it. If it snows, you break ice off the oars just to grip them properly. If waves are running high, you don't sleep at all. You bail water, adjust rigging, and pray to Thor that your ship doesn't break apart under the stress. Food on a longship is whatever doesn't spoil quickly. Dried fish so hard you have to soak it in seawater before chewing. Salted meat that tastes like leather soaked in brine. Barley cakes that turn to mush if they get wet and break your teeth if they don't. Water stored in wooden barrels that goes stale and slimy within days, developing a taste that makes you gag even when you're dying of thirst. You eat cold because cooking fires on wooden ships surrounded by rope and cloth are suicidal. You defecate over the side, timing your bodily functions with the waves to avoid creating a mess that makes everyone else's life more miserable. You urinate wherever you can manage it, usually downwind if you have any consideration for your shipmates. But this discomfort comes with unprecedented mobility. Roman galleys need hundreds of slaves to power them and can't operate far from supply bases. Frankish ships are too heavy for river navigation. Saxon vessels lack the seaworthiness for ocean voyages. Your longship can cross open seas, navigate shallow rivers, be carried over land between waterways, and beach anywhere with a gently sloping shore. You appear where enemies least expect you. Up rivers they thought impassable. On coasts they believed unreachable. In harbors they considered secure. You strike like lightning, sudden, devastating, gone before effective resistance can organize. By the time word of your attack reaches the nearest military garrison, you're 50 miles away, counting your loot. Navigation requires skills passed down through generations of seafaring families. You read the color of water to judge depth and current. You watch bird flight patterns to locate land. You follow whale migrations, interpret cloud formations, study the way waves reflect off distant shores. The sun and stars guide you when visible, but northern skies are often overcast for days at a time. You learn to read the sea's moods, the particular way waves behave before a storm, the color of the sky that means dangerous winds are coming, the feel of the air that suggests ice forming on the rigging. Old sailors can smell weather changes hours before they arrive, detecting subtle shifts in humidity, temperature, or atmospheric pressure that warn of approaching danger. When storms hit, you don't pray for mercy, you fight. Every man bails water while others struggle to keep the ship pointed into the waves. If you let a large wave catch you sideways, it can roll the vessel and drown everyone aboard. The helmsman needs strength to hold the steering oar steady against currents trying to tear it from his hands. The crew must work together or die together. There's no middle ground. Ship maintenance never stops. You caulk leaks with wool and tar. You replace broken oars, repair torn sails, tighten loose rigging. A longship requires constant attention because salt water corrodes iron, sun and wind weaken rope, and the flexing motion of the hull gradually loosens every joint. Neglect your ship, and it will fail you when you need it most. The crew bonds through shared hardship and mutual dependence. If one man falls overboard in a storm, you risk your own life to pull him back, not from kindness, but because you need every hand to survive. If someone steals from the common supplies, he loses a hand or gets thrown to the sharks, depending on how valuable he is and how generous the crew feels. If someone shows cowardice in battle, he's abandoned at the next landing to find his own way home. But when everything works, when the wind fills your sail, when the oars move in perfect rhythm, when your ship cuts through the waves like a blade through flesh, you feel like a god. The coastline slides past in a blur of green and brown. Seabirds cry overhead. The salt spray tastes like freedom and possibility. You're no longer just a farmer or craftsman or younger son with no inheritance. You're a sea wolf, a predator from the north, master of the whale road. And when you beach your ship on a foreign shore, with weapons ready and fire in your eyes, the people there learn why the very sight of a longship on the horizon sends them running for the nearest fortification. Because you haven't just crossed water, you've brought the storm with you. Section 6. Gods at the Table. Religion, Ritual, and the Supernatural. To survive the Viking Age, you must believe, not in mercy or forgiveness or eternal peace, but in gods who are as violent, unpredictable, and dangerous as the world they rule. These aren't distant deities who work in mysterious ways. They're active participants in your daily struggle for survival, and they expect you to earn their favor through blood, sacrifice, and unwavering courage. Odin, the Allfather, hangs himself from Yggdrasil for 9 days and nights, pierced by his own spear, to gain knowledge of the runes. He trades his eye for wisdom, sends ravens across the 9 worlds to gather information, and leads the wild hunt through winter skies, collecting the souls of the dead. Odin doesn't just watch from Asgard. He walks among mortals in disguise, testing their hospitality, courage, and wisdom. He might appear as a wandering old man seeking shelter, and how you treat him determines your fate. Offer him food and warmth despite your own poverty, and he might bless your crops or teach you powerful magic. Thor protects Midgard with his hammer Mjolnir, but only if you're worthy of protection. He fights giants and monsters, not because he loves humanity, but because chaos threatens the cosmic order he's sworn to maintain. When storms rage across your farm, that's Thor battling enemies in the sky above. When lightning strikes your neighbor's house but spares yours, that's Thor making a judgment about whose devotion is more sincere. Freya governs love, fertility, and war. Domains that might seem contradictory until you realize they're all about life and death, creation and destruction. She might bless your marriage with many children or curse your womb with barrenness. She could grant you victory in battle or ensure your weapons break at the crucial moment. Worship isn't confined to special buildings or specific days. Religion is woven into every aspect of existence, like threads in a tapestry. A successful raid requires offering spoils to the gods who granted victory. A good harvest demands thanksgiving sacrifices. A long winter calls for rituals to ensure the sun returns. Sacrifices aren't symbolic gestures. They're literal exchanges with supernatural forces. Animals first. Horses hung from sacred trees, cattle slaughtered at temple sites, pigs burned on funeral pyres. The gods want blood because blood contains life force, and life force is the only currency they accept. You don't just kill these animals, you offer them with specific prayers. At particular times, in designated places, following traditions passed down through generations of worshippers. When animal sacrifice isn't enough, when famine threatens, when enemies gather, when plague spreads through your community, human sacrifice becomes necessary. Not random murder, but carefully chosen offerings. Prisoners of war, volunteers seeking honor, criminals whose deaths might appease divine anger. These people are hanged from trees sacred to Odin, drowned in bogs dedicated to Nerthus, or burned alive in temple fires. The most elaborate sacrifices occur at major festivals every 9 years at Uppsala. According to foreign chroniclers, 9 males of every species, including humans, are hanged from the sacred grove. These festivals can last for days, with feasting, drinking, trading, legal proceedings, and religious ceremonies all happening simultaneously. They're not just spiritual events, but social and economic gatherings that strengthen community bonds. Seers and Volvas walk the line between the mortal world and the realm of spirits. These are usually women, though some men also possess the sight. They enter trances through drumming, chanting, or consuming psychoactive substances. In these altered states, they communicate with gods, ancestors, and various supernatural beings. Their prophecies guide important decisions: when to plant crops, where to raid, whom to marry, how to interpret omens. But dealing with supernatural forces is dangerous. Some seers go mad from what they see in the spirit world. Others become so consumed by their gifts that they lose touch with ordinary human concerns. A few disappear entirely, either killed by hostile spirits or transported to other realms. Even successful vulvas live apart from normal society, respected but feared, consulted but never fully trusted. Runes aren't just an alphabet, they're tools for communicating with divine forces. Each rune embodies specific concepts and powers. Carved into weapons, they can make blades sharper or ensure they never miss their targets. Inscribed on ships, they can provide favorable winds or protection from storms. Written on amulets, they can heal illnesses, attract lovers, or curse enemies. But runes must be used correctly, with proper knowledge and intent. Carve the wrong symbol, make an error in sequence, or attempt magic beyond your understanding, and the results can be catastrophic. Stories tell of men who tried to use love runes and instead drove their intended targets to madness, or warriors whose weapon runes backfired and caused their swords to shatter in battle. Daily life is filled with smaller rituals designed to maintain cosmic balance. You carve protective symbols into doorframes to keep evil spirits from entering your home. You bury bones at property boundaries to mark territory and ward off thieves. You speak charms over newborns to ensure they grow strong and healthy. The boundary between the living and the dead is thin here. Ancestors don't simply disappear. They remain active in family affairs, offering guidance through dreams, protecting descendants from harm, or punishing those who dishonor their memory. You maintain shrines to dead relatives, offering food and drink to keep them satisfied. Neglect these obligations, and your ancestors might withdraw their protection or actively work against you. Ghosts, Draugr, and other undead creatures are real threats requiring practical countermeasures. A man who dies badly, murdered, betrayed, or filled with rage might refuse to stay dead. These revenants possess tremendous strength and insatiable hunger for revenge. They can be stopped only by decapitation, burning, or proper burial with appropriate rituals. Some families post guards at graveyards during the dark months to prevent their dead from rising. Dreams carry messages from gods, ancestors, and spirits. Prophetic dreams warn of coming dangers or reveal hidden opportunities. Nightmare visitations from enemies or hostile spirits can cause actual physical harm. Sleep isn't just rest, it's a journey into supernatural realms where the unprepared can lose their sanity or their souls. The natural world pulses with spiritual energy. Every grove, stream, mountain, and stone might house a spirit that demands respect. Landvader, land spirits, can bless or curse your farming efforts depending on how you treat their territory. Disturb a sacred site or pollute a holy spring, and you'll face crop failures, livestock diseases, or worse, until you make proper amends. In this world, the gods are real, powerful, and present. They're not loving parents or merciful saviors. They're dangerous allies who might help you if you prove worthy, or destroy you if you displease them. Your survival depends not just on physical strength or clever tactics, but on maintaining proper relationships with forces beyond human understanding. And those forces are always watching, always judging, always hungry for the blood and devotion that keeps the cosmic order intact. Section 7. Fire and Ice. Surviving the Deadly Climate. The Viking Age climate doesn't just challenge you, it actively tries to kill you with methodical persistence. Like a patient assassin that never sleeps, never tires, and never shows mercy. Winter in the north doesn't arrive, it invades, conquering everything in its path with ruthless efficiency. The cold doesn't just make you uncomfortable, it penetrates your bones, your blood, your soul until you forget what warmth feels like. Temperatures plummet to levels that can freeze exposed skin in minutes, kill the unprepared in hours, and break the spirits of even hardened warriors. Darkness becomes a living entity during the deepest winter months. The sun rises around 10 in the morning, if you can call that pale, anemic disk crawling across the horizon a sunrise, and dies like a guttering candle by 3 in the afternoon. But even during those few hours of daylight, the sky remains gray as old pewter, heavy with clouds that promise snow, sleet, or freezing rain. Some days the sun doesn't appear at all, hidden behind storm systems that seem to have taken permanent residence in the northern sky. You burn wood faster than you can chop it, despite working from dawn to dusk gathering fuel. Every tree within reasonable distance of your settlement gets harvested, forcing you to venture farther and farther into dangerous wilderness. Areas where wolves hunt in packs and bandits prey on isolated woodcutters. The irony is cruel. You need fire to survive the cold, but gathering firewood exposes you to the very dangers you're trying to escape. Sleep becomes a desperate search for any source of warmth. You curl up next to goats, pigs, even chickens, using animal body heat to prevent your blood from freezing in your veins. Families huddle together under piles of furs, wool blankets, and whatever cloth they can gather, breathing on each other's faces to share warmth. You wake up with your hair frozen to whatever surface you've been sleeping against, your breath visible in clouds that crystallize and fall to the ground. Snow doesn't just fall, it accumulates in drifts that can bury entire buildings. Roofs collapse under the weight, trapping families inside until neighbors can dig them out, assuming anyone realizes they're trapped before they suffocate or freeze. You spend hours every day shoveling pathways between buildings, knowing that a single blizzard can erase all your work and leave you isolated in a white wasteland. Ice transforms the landscape into a treacherous maze of hidden dangers. Rivers and streams freeze solid, cutting off water sources and transportation routes. But the ice isn't uniform. Thin spots can collapse under your weight, plunging you into water so cold it stops your heart in seconds. Even experienced travelers misjudge ice thickness and disappear beneath surfaces that looked solid from above. Your house becomes both shelter and prison. The turf roof, designed to insulate against summer heat, now traps moisture that freezes and expands, cracking the wooden support beams. Drafts find every gap in the walls, creating wind tunnels that suck heat from the interior faster than your fire can produce it. You stuff cloth, moss, even dried dung into cracks, but the cold always finds new ways inside. Clothing becomes armor against death. Layer upon layer of wool, fur, and leather, each piece carefully crafted to trap body heat while allowing enough movement to work. But even the best winter clothing has limits. Exposed skin freezes within minutes of exposure to wind and sub-zero temperatures. Frostbite claims fingers, toes, noses, and ears, leaving survivors permanently disfigured and disabled. Food preservation becomes a desperate race against spoilage and starvation. Meat must be smoked, salted, or dried before winter arrives. Grains need proper storage to prevent moisture from rotting them or rodents from consuming them. Root vegetables get buried in pits lined with stones and covered with turf. But all these methods can fail, and when they do, your family faces death by famine. Winter illnesses kill more people than enemy weapons. Lung fever, brought on by breathing cold air and living in smoke-filled buildings, develops into pneumonia that drowns victims in their own fluids. Stomach sickness spreads through families forced to live in close quarters with poor sanitation. Simple cuts become infected and gangrenous when bodies lack the nutrition needed for healing. Children and elderly people die first when resources run low. Harsh pragmatism governs survival decisions. You save the food for those most likely to survive and most capable of productive work. Grandparents starve themselves to leave more food for grandchildren. Parents make impossible choices about which children to feed when there isn't enough for everyone. But summer brings its own trials. The midnight sun that never sets drives some people to madness, literally. Sleep cycles become disrupted when darkness never arrives to signal bedtime. Men drink themselves unconscious just to escape the relentless daylight. Others develop a condition that manifests as violent behavior, paranoia, and hallucinations. Flooding arrives with spring thaw, washing away months of work in a matter of hours. Rivers burst their banks, carrying away bridges, livestock, even entire buildings. The same water sources that were frozen solid for months now become raging torrents, impossible to cross or control. Insects emerge in biblical swarms during the brief summer months. Mosquitoes, black flies, and gnats form clouds so thick they can suffocate animals and drive humans to the edge of sanity. These aren't mere annoyances. They carry diseases, create infected wounds through their bites, and make outdoor work nearly impossible during peak infestation periods. Summer heat, when it comes, can be as deadly as winter cold. Temperatures soar without warning, spoiling food supplies and creating drought conditions that kill crops and dry up water sources. The same people who spent months praying for warmth now curse the sun that beats down mercilessly on their unshaded fields and pastures. Weather patterns are unpredictable and extreme. A warm spring followed by a sudden freeze can destroy an entire year's crops in a single night. Violent storms with hail the size of chicken eggs can kill livestock and flatten grain fields. Tornadoes and waterspouts, while rare, can appear without warning and devastate everything in their path. You survive by preparing constantly for the next seasonal assault. Summer means frantically gathering resources for winter. Winter means enduring until spring arrives. Spring means repairing damage and planting new crops. Autumn means harvesting whatever managed to grow and preparing for another winter siege. There's no retirement from this struggle, no vacation from the war against climate. You fight weather every day until you die, and if you're lucky, your children inherit the knowledge and tools they need to continue the battle. Because in the Viking Age, nature isn't just indifferent to human suffering. It's actively hostile, and only the strongest, smartest, and most ruthless survive its relentless attacks. Section 8. Trade, Trickery, and Silver Tongues. Not every Viking survives by the sword. Some survive by the silver tongue, the sharp mind, and the ability to turn words into weapons more deadly than any blade. If you can't raid your way to wealth, you'll have to trade for it. And trading in the Viking Age is just warfare conducted through different means. Your ship carries amber from the Baltic shores, fossilized tree sap that wealthy southerners prize for jewelry and medicine. Walrus ivory from the far north, harder and whiter than elephant tusks, carved into intricate decorations and religious artifacts. Furs from Arctic foxes, seals, and bears that keep Byzantine emperors warm through Constantinople winters. These aren't just trade goods, they're your arsenal in an economic war where victory means survival and defeat means death. You sail to trading centers that exist in a constant state of barely controlled chaos. Hidaby, at the base of the Jutland Peninsula, where merchants from across northern Europe gather to buy, sell, cheat, and occasionally murder each other over disputed contracts. Birka, in the Swedish Lake District, where Arabic silver flows like water in exchange for northern furs and amber. Staraya Ladoga, on the river routes to Byzantium, where Slavic tribes, Byzantine merchants, and Norse traders create volatile mixtures of languages, religions, and commercial interests. In these markets, you hear every language spoken from Iceland to Baghdad. Arabic merchants counting silver dirhams with calloused fingers. Byzantine Greeks offering silk and spices while watching for thieves. Slavic traders selling honey, wax, and slaves captured in tribal wars. Frankish merchants with cross-marked coins and suspicious eyes. Each group speaks different languages, worships different gods, follows different laws, but all understand the universal language of profit and loss. You learn to weigh silver by sound, bounce, and feel. Coins can be clipped, shaved, or counterfeited. A dishonest merchant might offer you silver-plated lead or copper pieces disguised with mercury. You carry small scales, testing weights, and metalworking tools to verify the purity of precious metals. Trust no one's word when silver is involved. Verify everything or lose everything. Fraudulent practices are as common as honest dealing. Merchants water their mead, mix sand with their grain, sell diseased animals as healthy livestock. Buyers present false credentials, use counterfeit currency, or simply disappear with merchandise they've agreed to pay for later. Everyone tries to cheat everyone else, making successful trading as much about avoiding deception as creating value. You discover which trading partners honor their agreements and which ones need watching. A merchant who consistently delivers quality goods on time becomes more valuable than family members. One who cheats you even once becomes a lifelong enemy. Reputations spread faster than disease through trading networks. Earn a name as trustworthy, and doors open across continents. Gain a reputation as dishonest, and you'll find yourself excluded from profitable opportunities. The slave trade forms the dark foundation of much Viking commerce. Prisoners of war, kidnapped civilians, people sold by their own families during famines, all become human merchandise transported to markets from Dublin to Baghdad. Young women command the highest prices, destined for harems or wealthy households. Strong men sell as laborers or guards. Children are trained for specific skills or occupations. This isn't abstract evil. It's practical economics. In a world where human life has market value, slaves provide labor for farms, workshops, and ships. They generate income through their work and can be sold when owners need quick cash. Some slaves eventually earn freedom through loyal service, while others die in bondage, forgotten and unmourned. Navigation of trading routes requires knowledge passed down through generations of merchants. Which rivers are navigable at what times of year, where bandits attack travelers, and which local authorities can be bribed for protection. What goods are in high demand at specific locations, and which items have become oversupplied and worthless. Currency systems vary dramatically across trading regions. Arabic silver dirhams are accepted almost everywhere, but fluctuate in value, based on silver content and political stability in Muslim lands. Byzantine gold, solidi command respect, but are rare and easily counterfeited. Frankish denarii work in Western Europe, but are worthless in Eastern markets. Some areas still operate on pure barter systems, where goods exchange directly without monetary intermediaries. Seasonal trading patterns determine when and where profits can be made. Furs command highest prices during autumn preparation for winter. Amber is most valuable during spring and summer, when wealthy customers can afford luxury purchases. Weapons sell best during fighting seasons. Food, commodities peak in value during planting or harvest times when other communities face shortages. Some Norse traders establish permanent settlements in foreign territories, gradually transitioning from temporary visitors to permanent residents. Dublin begins as a Viking trading post and evolves into an Irish-Norse city. Kiev starts as a Norse fortress controlling river trade and becomes the center of a Slavic-Norse hybrid culture. York transforms from Anglo-Saxon city to Norse commercial center. These merchant settlers face constant tension between maintaining Norse identity and adapting to local customs. Their children grow up speaking multiple languages, practicing blended religious traditions, and navigating complex political relationships between Norse and non-Norse communities. Some eventually assimilate completely into local cultures, while others maintain distinct Norse enclaves for generations. Political relationships determine trading success as much as commercial skills. A war between kingdoms can close profitable routes overnight. A royal marriage might open new markets or create trade monopolies. Local rulers demand tribute, taxes, or gifts for permission to trade in their territories. Merchants who understand these political currents survive and prosper, while those who ignore politics lose their investments and sometimes their lives. Information becomes as valuable as physical trade goods. Knowledge of crop failures in distant regions can create opportunities to sell food at premium prices. News of military conflicts might indicate increased demand for weapons and armor. Understanding religious or cultural changes helps predict shifts in luxury goods markets. Successful traders develop networks of contacts, informants, and partners stretching across continents. These relationships require constant maintenance through gifts, favors, and mutual assistance. A merchant who helps associates during difficult times can expect similar support when his own fortunes decline. Those who act purely from self-interest find themselves isolated and vulnerable when crises arise. To survive as a trader rather than a raider, you need a mind as sharp as any sword, a tongue as smooth as polished silver, and the ability to see opportunities where others see only obstacles. The silver in your hand today might be the steel at your throat tomorrow, if you make the wrong deals with the wrong people. But master the art of peaceful commerce, and you can build wealth that lasts generations, assuming you live long enough to enjoy it. Section 9. The Home Front. Women, Children, and the Hidden Struggle. Not all battles are fought on blood-soaked fields with axes and spears. Some are fought in smoky longhouses with needle and thread, in birthing beds with life and death, in daily struggles that receive no glory but determine whether civilization continues or collapses into chaos. Women in the Viking Age don't live as decorative accessories or silent shadows. They run complex households with the strategic minds of military commanders and the practical skills of master craftsmen. A Viking woman manages livestock, coordinates agricultural work, supervises textile production, maintains food stores, treats injuries and illnesses, and often handles the family's commercial transactions. When her husband goes raiding or trading, she becomes the sole authority for everything that keeps the family alive. The mistress of a household controls keys, literally. She wears them on her belt as symbols of authority and practical tools of daily management. Keys to storerooms where grain, preserved meat, and valuable goods are kept secure from thieves, servants, and hungry children. Keys to chests containing silver, jewelry, and important documents. Keys to workshops where cloth is woven, tools are forged, and household goods are manufactured. These aren't ceremonial decorations. They represent real power over life and death resources. Textile production requires skills that take decades to master and knowledge passed from mother to daughter through generations. Growing flax and processing it into linen, raising sheep and transforming their wool into warm, durable cloth, gathering plants to create dyes that won't fade after repeated washing, operating looms, spinning wheels, and other complex equipment that represents significant family investment. A woman's needlework isn't just domestic craft, it's economic production that can determine family prosperity. Fine embroidery decorates the clothing of wealthy merchants and nobles, commanding high prices in local and international markets. Tapestries and wall hangings provide insulation while displaying family wealth and status. Sailcloth for ships must be woven to precise specifications. Lives depend on quality workmanship that prevents sails from tearing during storms. Brewing requires chemical knowledge that borders on alchemy. Different grains produce different flavors and alcohol content. Hops must be added at specific times during the brewing process to achieve proper preservation and taste. Temperature control determines whether the final product is drinkable ale or poisonous swill. A skilled brewer can create beverages that heal stomach ailments, celebrate important occasions, or get enemies drunk enough to kill without resistance. Food preservation means the difference between survival and starvation during the long winter months. Smoking meat requires understanding how different woods affect flavor and preservation. Salting fish demands knowledge of proper salt-to-meat ratios and storage techniques. Fermenting dairy products creates foods that remain edible for months while providing essential nutrition. Drying fruits and vegetables concentrates nutrients while extending shelf life. Medical knowledge combines practical experience with supernatural beliefs, creating treatment methods that sometimes work despite being based on incomplete understanding of human anatomy and disease. Women learn to set broken bones, treat wounds, deliver babies, and diagnose illnesses based on symptoms and patient behavior. They gather medicinal herbs, prepare poultices and potions, and perform minor surgical procedures using whatever tools are available. Midwifery is perhaps the most crucial and dangerous female profession. Childbirth kills mothers and babies with horrifying regularity, making successful midwives literally lifesavers for their communities. They must understand normal birth processes, recognize complications before they become fatal, and make quick decisions under extreme pressure. A midwife's reputation can make her wealthy and respected, while failure can result in accusations of witchcraft or deliberate harm. Property rights for women exceed those in many other medieval societies. A woman can own land, inherit from deceased relatives, and pass property to her children. She can initiate divorce proceedings against husbands who are impotent, violent, or unwilling to fulfill their marital obligations. A divorced woman retains control of her dowry and any property she brought to the marriage, giving her economic independence unusual for the time period. Legal standing allows women to testify in court, bring charges against men who wrong them, and even demand compensation for injuries or insults. A woman who kills her rapist faces no legal consequences. A wife whose husband beats her excessively can seek divorce and financial restitution. Some women become legal experts, memorizing complex oral traditions and serving as advisors to male relatives involved in legal disputes. Marriage negotiations involve economic calculations as much as romantic attraction. Parents evaluate potential sons-in-law based on their fighting ability, earning potential, family reputation, and likelihood of survival to old age. Daughters are assessed for their domestic skills, childbearing prospects, and the dowries they can contribute to new households. Love might develop after marriage, but practical considerations determine who marries whom. Some women achieve positions of unusual authority and independence. Female merchants travel extensively, managing their own trading operations and accumulating personal wealth. Others become vulva seers, who communicate with supernatural forces and advise communities on important decisions. A few inherit leadership roles when male relatives die, ruling territories and commanding military forces. Children don't experience childhoods in any modern sense. They begin working as soon as they can walk steadily and hold simple tools. 5-year-olds herd sheep, gather firewood, and help with food preparation. 7-year-olds spin wool, tend chickens, and learn basic craft skills. 10-year-olds can handle most adult tasks, though not with adult efficiency or strength. Education happens through observation and participation rather than formal instruction. Children learn by watching adults work and gradually taking on more complex responsibilities. Boys observe men farming, fighting, and crafting, while girls watch women managing households and caring for families. Mistakes are corrected immediately and sometimes harshly. There's no time for patient explanation when survival depends on competent performance. Physical discipline is common and accepted as necessary for producing adults capable of surviving in a harsh world. Children who make dangerous mistakes or show disrespect toward elders face immediate correction through physical punishment. This isn't cruelty, it's practical education designed to prevent behaviors that could lead to injury, death, or social rejection. Life expectancy hovers around 30 to 35 years for those who survive childhood, making every year precious and every decision critical. A woman might bear 8 or 10 children, but see only 3 or 4 reach adulthood. Common causes of death include disease, accidents, violence, and complications from childbirth or injury. Families must constantly prepare for the possibility that key members might die without warning. Elderly people occupy ambiguous positions in Viking society. Their experience and knowledge make them valuable advisors, but their inability to perform physical labor makes them economic burdens during times of scarcity. Some grandparents voluntarily reduce their food consumption during famines, essentially starving themselves so younger family members have better chances of survival. Others maintain authority through their wisdom and continue contributing to family welfare through crafts, childcare, and decision-making. Domestic violence exists but operates within legal and social constraints that limit its severity and frequency. A husband who beats his wife excessively can face legal consequences, including divorce proceedings that force him to provide financial compensation. Community pressure also regulates family behavior. Neighbors intervene in situations that threaten children's welfare or disrupt community stability. Winter isolation intensifies all domestic tensions and challenges. Families spend months confined together in small, poorly ventilated spaces with limited privacy and constant stress from cold, hunger, and boredom. Tempers flare over trivial matters. Children become restless and difficult to manage. Adults develop cabin fever that can lead to violence or mental breakdown. The hidden struggle on the home front lacks the drama and glory of raiding expeditions, but it requires equal courage and determination. Women who successfully manage households, raise children, and maintain family stability in the face of constant threats deserve recognition as warriors in their own right. Their battlefield is the daily grind of survival, and their victories ensure that Norse culture continues into the next generation. Without these unsung heroes, the famous Viking raiders would have had no homes to return to, no families to support, and no reason to fight. The home front isn't where legends are born. It's where legends are made possible through the quiet heroism of people who choose survival over surrender. Day after day, year after year, generation after generation. Section 10. Death, Burial, and the Afterlife. Death in the Viking Age isn't an ending, it's a transition. A journey to destinations that depend on how you lived, how you died, and how your survivors honor your memory. The afterlife isn't guaranteed salvation or eternal punishment, but a continuation of existence in forms determined by your earthly actions and the gods' judgment. A good death happens in battle, weapon in hand, enemies falling around you like wheat before the scythe. This isn't just poetic imagery, it's religious doctrine with practical implications. Warriors who die fighting with courage earn passage to Valhalla, Odin's hall, where heroes feast and train for Ragnarok, the final battle that will determine the fate of all worlds. But dying in battle isn't automatic entrance to Valhalla. The Valkyries, Odin's supernatural battle maidens, choose which fallen warriors deserve this honor. The Valkyries evaluate not just battlefield death, but the manner of dying. A warrior who flees in terror and gets cut down while running receives no consideration for Valhalla. One who dies accidentally or from friendly fire doesn't qualify. Even a man killed by enemies might be rejected if he showed cowardice, dishonor, or poor judgment. The gods want heroes in their halls, not casualties. Valhalla itself is a warrior's paradise, designed for men who live for combat. Every day, the Einherjar chosen slain fight epic battles, dying repeatedly and rising again to fight tomorrow. Every evening, they feast on mead that never runs dry and meat from a boar that regenerates each day after being consumed. This isn't peaceful rest, it's eternal preparation for the ultimate conflict. But most people don't die in battle. Most die coughing blood from lung fever, screaming in childbirth, wasting away from disease, or simply aging beyond their body's ability to continue functioning. These deaths lead to hell, the realm of the goddess Hel, where the dishonorably dead spend eternity in conditions that range from merely unpleasant to actively torturous, depending on their earthly behavior. Hell isn't hell in the Christian sense. It's not eternal punishment for sin, but rather a dreary continuation of existence for those who don't qualify for better afterlives. The dead in hell aren't tortured by demons, but simply exist in a cold, shadowy realm where nothing interesting ever happens. For people who lived active, meaningful lives, this eternal boredom might be worse than physical torment. Some sources describe additional destinations for the dead. Freya claims half of those slain in battle for her Hall, though the criteria for this selection remain unclear. Sailors who drown might go to Ran's net beneath the waves. Those who die at sea could end up in Gyr's Hall, where they spend eternity drinking ale with other drowned souls. Burial practices reflect social status, personal beliefs, and family resources. A wealthy jarl might receive a ship burial placed in a real vessel with weapons, jewelry, food, and sometimes sacrificed servants, then burned in a spectacular funeral pyre, visible for miles. The smoke carries his soul to the afterlife, while demonstrating his family's wealth, and ensuring his memory lasts for generations. Poorer individuals receive simpler but still meaningful burials. Stone circles mark grave sites and provide focus points for memorial offerings. Earthen mounds contain bodies wrapped in cloth or placed in wooden coffins, along with personal possessions needed for the journey to the afterlife. Even the poorest families provide some grave goods, a knife, a piece of jewelry, food for the journey. Because arriving in the afterlife empty-handed marks you as someone whose family didn't care enough to equip you properly. Cremation versus inhumation often depends on local customs, family preferences, and practical considerations. Burning bodies requires substantial amounts of wood, making it expensive in areas where fuel is precious. Burial preserves the physical form, but requires suitable ground and protection from wild animals. Some families combine both methods, burning the body and then burying the ashes with appropriate ceremonies. Human sacrifice at funerals serves multiple purposes. Prominent men might take servants, concubines, or slaves with them to continue serving in the afterlife. These victims might volunteer for the honor. Being chosen to accompany a respected leader could be seen as preferable to living as property under new owners. More often, captives or criminals are killed to provide the dead with retainers appropriate to their earthly status. The sacrificial process follows specific rituals designed to ensure the victims' souls properly accompany their masters, rather than becoming vengeful spirits. Some are strangled with cords blessed by priests. Others are stabbed with sacred knives, while prayers are recited. A few are drowned in holy springs or bogs. The methods vary, but the goal remains consistent, transforming living people into spiritual servants for the deceased. Grave goods serve practical purposes in the afterlife economy. Warriors receive weapons because they'll need to fight in Valhalla or defend themselves during the journey to their final destination. Women get household tools, jewelry, and textiles because they'll continue managing domestic responsibilities. Children receive toys and small tools appropriate to their age and expected roles. Some items are killed before being placed in graves. Swords are bent or broken. Shields are punctured. Jewelry is twisted out of shape. This destruction might transfer the object's spiritual essence to the afterlife, while preventing grave robbers from stealing valuable items. It might also symbolically break the connection between the living world and the dead person's possessions. Memorial practices extend far beyond burial ceremonies. Families hold regular feasts honoring deceased relatives, offering food and drink to maintain connections with ancestral spirits. Anniversaries of deaths become occasions for storytelling, where the deceased person's deeds are recounted to preserve their memory and provide examples for living descendants. Some dead refuse to stay buried. Draugr animated corpses rise from their graves to terrorize the living, driven by rage, unfinished business, or improper burial rites. These undead beings possess supernatural strength and insatiable hunger for revenge against those who wronged them in life. They can be stopped only through decapitation, burning, or exorcism performed by skilled practitioners. Preventing Draugr involves careful attention to burial procedures and post-mortem relationships with the deceased. Bodies must be positioned correctly with appropriate prayers and protective symbols. Families must fulfill obligations to dead relatives through regular offerings and memorial observances. Failure to maintain these spiritual contracts can result in violent haunting that threatens entire communities. Dreams provide communication channels between the living and the dead. Deceased relatives appear in sleep visions to offer advice, deliver warnings, or request assistance with unfinished earthly business. These dream encounters aren't mere psychological phenomena, but genuine spiritual communications requiring serious attention and appropriate responses. Some people experience prophetic dreams about their own deaths, receiving advance warning about when, where, and how they'll die. These death dreams are both blessing and curse. They provide opportunities to prepare spiritually and practically for the end. But they also burden recipients with foreknowledge of their fate. Acting on dream prophecies might prevent predicted deaths or merely fulfill them through different means. The Viking understanding of death emphasizes continuity rather than termination. Death ends physical existence, but not personal identity or social relationships. The dead remain active participants in family affairs, maintaining interest in descendants' welfare and the honor of their bloodlines. Living family members have ongoing obligations to deceased relatives, while the dead continue protecting and guiding their survivors. This interconnection between living and dead creates a supernatural support network that extends across generations. Ancestors provide wisdom, protection, and assistance to descendants who honor their memory and maintain proper relationships with the spirit world. In return, the living ensure that ancestral names and deeds are remembered, preventing the final death that comes when no one speaks your name or tells your story. Death in the Viking Age is terrible but not final. Its transformation, journey, and continuation rather than simple ending. How you die matters, but how you're remembered matters more. The ultimate victory isn't avoiding death, it's ensuring that your name and deeds survive in the stories people tell around their fires long after your body has returned to the earth that birthed it. Section 11. Enemies at the Edge. Facing foreign powers. To survive the Viking Age, you must know who stands beyond the sea and who wants you dead. The world beyond your fjords teems with enemies who speak strange tongues and worship foreign gods. Each coastline you approach harbors different threats, different opportunities, different ways to die. Learning to read these foreign powers, their strengths, their weaknesses, their predictable treacheries, becomes as vital as reading wind and tide. The Franks to the south build fortresses and cross themselves at dawn. They call you heathens, devils, scourges from the north. They offer gold one year, then steal the next. Their empire stretches from the Rhine to the Pyrenees, a patchwork of duchies and counties held together by oaths that break like morning frost. Charlemagne's heirs squabble over his throne, while his borders bleed Viking raids. The Franks are rich, their monasteries glitter with gold, their towns bustle with trade, but they're also fractured. One duke pays you tribute, while his neighbor sharpens his sword for revenge. You learn to exploit these divisions. When Charles the Bald fights his brother Louis, you strike both their lands while they're distracted. When the Frankish nobles gather for their assemblies, you burn their undefended estates. Their stone fortresses may turn aside your axes, but their wooden churches burn beautifully in the night. The Franks adapt quickly though. They build fortified bridges across their rivers, garrison their monasteries, create mobile armies that can respond to your raids. By the time your sons are raiding, the easy pickings are gone. The Franks have learned to fight Vikings, and their learning costs blood. The English kingdoms, Mercia, Wessex, Northumbria, are fractured. One king dies, another rises. They bribe you with land, then plot to poison your ale. One moment you're a guest, the next you're hunted like a wolf. England is a chessboard where the pieces change color with each move. The Heptarchy's 7 kingdoms that once divided the land between them has collapsed into a 3-way struggle for supremacy. Egbert of Wessex claims overlordship, but Mercian axes and Northumbrian spears dispute his crown. This chaos is your opportunity. When Northumbria's nobles murder their king and civil war erupts, you sail up the Tyne and wear unopposed. When Mercia and Wessex clash at battle, you harry both their flanks. The English pay you, Danegeld, tribute in silver to buy peace, but peace with Vikings is like capturing smoke. You take their silver, spend the winter in Denmark, then return with twice as many ships. Some English kings try to hire you as mercenaries against their rivals, and you gladly take their gold to burn their enemies' halls. But remember, the English learn fast. Alfred of Wessex studies your tactics, builds fleets to match your ships, creates fortified towns called burhs where his people can shelter. What begins as easy raiding becomes a grinding war of sieges and ambushes. To the east, Slavs and Rus fight like bears and trade like snakes. The Slavic tribes stretch from the Baltic to the Black Sea, a bewildering maze of Wends, Poles, Czechs, and Russians. Some are fierce warriors who coat their axes with poison and fight naked in winter storms. Others are merchants who'll sell their own mothers for Byzantine gold. The Rus Vikings, who went east instead of west, have carved kingdoms from the Russian wilderness. They control the river routes to Constantinople, extracting tribute from Slavic tribes, while serving as the Byzantine emperor's Varangian guard. These Eastern Vikings are your kinsmen and your competitors. They speak Old Norse, worship the same gods, but they've grown rich on Eastern trade while you scrape for silver in Western raids. When you meet them in Kiev or Novgorod, the greeting is friendly, but watch your back. They know your fighting style because they share it, know your weaknesses because they are theirs. Some of your warriors join their river expeditions, trading northern furs for southern silk. Others die in the rapids of the Dnieper, arrows in their backs, their treasure claimed by Rus Jarls, who toast their memory while counting their gold. Byzantines cloak daggers in silk. The Eastern Roman Empire endures where its western cousin fell, but it endures through cunning rather than strength. Byzantine diplomats arrive at your court bearing gifts, silk from China, spices from India, gold from Africa, and speaking honeyed words about friendship and mutual benefit. They want you to fight their enemies, the Bulgars, the Arabs, the Rus. They'll pay well for your service. But remember, Byzantines have survived for centuries by playing barbarians against each other. Today you're their ally, tomorrow you're the threat they pay others to destroy. Their capital, Constantinople, glitters like a jewel beside the Golden Horn. Its walls have never fallen to assault. Its harbors bristle with Greek fire that burns on water itself. Some of your warriors join the Varangian Guard, the emperor's elite bodyguard composed entirely of northern axemen. They serve for 20 years, grow rich on Byzantine gold, and return to Scandinavia with enough treasure to buy kingdoms. But many never return. They die in Anatolia fighting Saracens, or in Italy fighting Normans, or in palace coups where Byzantine politics turn as sharp as Byzantine steel. Even the Muslims of Al-Andalus send word of your raids, muttering prayers and loading ships with steel. The Iberian Peninsula burns with holy war as Christian kingdoms slowly push south against the emirate of your raids. Add chaos, you sack Lisbon while it's Christian, while it's Muslim, caring nothing for their religious wars. The Muslims of Al-Andalus are wealthy and learned. Their libraries contain ancient Greek texts. Their workshops produce Damascus steel. Their gardens bloom with oranges and pomegranates, unknown in the north. But they also remember how your ships appeared without warning in their harbors, how your axes split their scholars' skulls, how you carried their children north as slaves. Some Muslims pay you tribute to avoid raids. The emir sends ambassadors to your court, bearing gifts and treaties written in Arabic script that none of your scribes can read. But treaties with Vikings are like promises to the wind. They bind only until the next storm. When the tribute stops flowing, your ships return to Iberian waters, and the cycle of raid and reprisal begins anew. Every raid teaches you something: how they defend, how they betray, how they break. Each foreign shore is a lesson written in blood and gold. You learn that Frankish cavalry charges in formation, but breaks if you kill their horses. That English shield walls are impenetrable from the front, but crumble if attacked from behind. That Slavic ambushes rely on forest paths, but fail on open ground. That Byzantine Greek fire burns everything except sand and vinegar. That Muslim fortress walls may be high, but their gates open to silver as readily as to steel. But the most important lesson is this: your enemies adapt. The tactics that worked for your father may kill your son. The Franks, who once fled from a handful of Vikings, now field armies that outnumber your entire fleet. The English, who once paid tribute, now build fleets to hunt you on the open sea. Even the Slavs, once easy prey for slave raids, now fight with captured Viking weapons and captured Viking tactics. And some of you don't just fight, you settle. You become kings in foreign lands. You take their daughters and burn their churches. You carve your name into their stones. The greatest Vikings are not just raiders, but conquerors. Rollo carves out Normandy from Frankish lands, founding a dynasty that will eventually conquer England. The sons of Ragnar establish kingdoms in York and Dublin. ruling Anglo-Saxon and Irish subjects with Viking law. In the east, Rurik's descendants create the Russian state, their Scandinavian names gradually Slavicized as they intermarry with local nobility. Settlement brings new challenges. A raider can leave when the fighting turns against him, but a king must hold his ground. You must learn to speak the local language, understand local customs, balance your Viking warriors against your foreign subjects. Your own people may resent you for going native, while your new subjects never fully trust a foreign ruler. Rebellion always threatens, sometimes from your Viking followers who think you've grown soft, sometimes from your foreign subjects who dream of native rule. But never forget, they outnumber you, outgun you, outlast you. For every Viking ship that crosses the North Sea, 100 foreign warriors stand ready to defend their shores. For every Viking settlement carved from foreign soil, 1,000 natives plot to reclaim their land. The mathematics of conquest are always against you. You survive through skill, speed, and sheer audacious courage, but numbers tell in the end. You survive by staying unpredictable. Hit them where they sleep. Leave before dawn. Show no pattern. Make your legend so terrifying that fear does half the work. The moment your enemies learn to predict your movements, you're dead. Strike the same coast twice, and they'll be waiting with an army. Follow the same seasonal pattern, and they'll block your escape routes. Become predictable, and you become prey. Terror is your greatest weapon. A dozen Vikings who fight like berserkers can scatter 100 farmers. A single longship appearing on the horizon can empty an entire monastery. Stories of your savagery spread faster than your ships. Tales of how you sacrifice prisoners to your gods, how you make blood eagles of captured kings, how you drink from the skulls of your enemies. Some stories are true, others are exaggerated, but all serve your purpose. Fear makes enemies flee instead of fight, pay tribute instead of resisting, submit instead of organizing resistance. You're not just a Viking, you're a storm in human form. You appear without warning, strike without mercy, and vanish before the counterattack can form. You are the nightmare that haunts foreign shores, the wolf that stalks the edges of civilization. The northern darkness made flesh and given an axe. Your name becomes a curse word in foreign languages. Your image carved into their churches as a demon to be warded off. Your legend woven into their children's nightmares. But remember, even storms eventually pass. Section 12. Blood and Bone. Medicine and the Limits of Healing. Pain is constant. Injury is daily. Healing is a gamble. In a world where violence is both profession and passion, where every day brings new ways to break bone and spill blood, the line between life and death runs thinner than a blade's edge. Your body is your most precious possession and your most fragile one, a collection of scars and aches that tells the story of every battle survived, every raid endured, every winter weathered. Learning to mend what warfare breaks, to heal what hardship tears, becomes as vital as learning to wield an axe. There are no doctors, only folk healers, midwives, and old men who've seen enough wounds to know which ones kill. The learned physicians of Baghdad and trained surgeons of Constantinople and Paris. These are luxuries as foreign to your world as silk and spices. Instead, you rely on practical knowledge passed down through generations of warriors, hunters, and survivors. The village-wise woman who delivered you into this world is the same one who'll decide if you leave it from a battle wound. Her hands gnarled with age and stained with 1,000 remedies, hold more real healing power than all the Latin texts in Christendom. These healers work with what the land provides. They know which mosses stop bleeding, which barks reduce fever, which roots dull pain. Their education comes from necessity, not books. Decades of watching men die and live, of trying everything and remembering what worked. They understand that healing is part craft, part luck, and part divine intervention. When they examine your wound, they're not just seeing torn flesh, but calculating odds, how deep, how clean, how long since the injury, what season, what age, what other hurts your body already carries. Bones are set with splints of pine. Wounds are stitched with animal sinew. When your leg snaps beneath a falling horse, or your arm breaks, parrying a sword blow, the healer works quickly before the bone starts knitting wrong. Fresh pine wood, split and shaped, holds the break straight while bone grows back together. The pain of setting is excruciating. You bite leather straps while strong hands pull your bones into alignment. Sometimes the break is too severe, the damage too great. Then you face a choice. Keep a useless limb that may rot and kill you, or lose it clean and live as a cripple. Needle and thread are luxuries. More often, wounds are sewn with sinew stripped from deer or pig, sometimes even your own livestock. The wise woman threads this through wounds with thorns or carved bone needles, pulling flesh together while you scream into bunched cloth. Deep cuts must be cleaned first, with ale if you're lucky, boiled water if you're not, sometimes just cold stream water and prayer. Dirt and rust in wounds turn to corruption, and corruption kills more warriors than enemy blades. Infection is fought with moldy bread or honey if you're lucky. The ancients understood something about certain molds that modern knowledge has forgotten and will not rediscover for centuries. Moldy bread, the green-blue fungi that grows on old grain, sometimes works miracles on festering wounds. Honey, especially from wild bees, carries its own healing magic. Packed into clean wounds, it draws out corruption and sweetens flesh back to health. But these remedies are precious and rare. More often, you fight infection with garlic poultices, willow bark tea, and desperate hope. Teeth rot, gums swell, coughs kill. Dental care is crude at best, a matter of scraping teeth clean with twigs and pulling the worst ones with iron tongs. Tooth rot brings agony that can drive men mad, but the cure is often worse than the disease. A pulled tooth leaves a wound that may fester, spreading poison through your jaw and into your brain. Gums bleed constantly in winter when fresh food grows scarce and your body weakens. Some warriors file their teeth to points, claiming it makes them more fearsome in battle. But mostly, it just makes eating harder and infection more likely. Respiratory ailments kill more Vikings than enemy axes. The damp cold of northern winters, the smoke-filled halls where you spend long months, the sea spray that soaks your lungs during raids, all conspire to fill your chest with corruption. Coughs start small but grow into lung fever that drowns you in your own fluids. The wise women brew teas from pine needles, coltsfoot, and elderflower, but these remedies work slowly, if at all. When the lung fever really takes hold, you either fight it off through pure strength or die drowning in your own bed. You make poultices from herbs, boil roots into bitter tea, and pray the gods are in a good mood. Every plant in the northern forests has its use, its power, its proper season for gathering. Spring brings fresh nettle for winter-weakened blood. Summer offers yarrow for wounds, meadowsweet for pain, willow bark for fever. Fall provides the roots and berries that will see you through winter's hardships. But knowing which plant helps which ailment is knowledge earned through trial and error, success and failure, life and death. The wise women gather these herbs under specific conditions, certain phases of the moon, particular times of day, special words spoken during harvest. Whether these rituals hold real power or just make the medicine seem stronger matters less than the fact that they work often enough to keep the tradition alive. A poultice of comfrey and plantain, gathered at dawn and blessed with the right words, can heal a wound that would otherwise fester. Whether the healing comes from the herbs, the ritual, or the patient's faith in both is a question for philosophers, not survivors. Sometimes leeches are used, sometimes magic. The boundary between medicine and mysticism blurs when death stalks every injury. Leeches, pulled from stagnant ponds and applied to swollen wounds, draw out bad blood and reduce inflammation. The wise women know where to place them, how long to leave them, when their use helps and when it hurts. But leeches are also used magically, applied according to runic calculations, removed at astronomically significant moments, their behavior interpreted as omens of recovery or doom. Runes are carved into skin to stop bleeding, charms whispered over burns. The healing power of symbols runs deep in the northern mind. When practical medicine reaches its limits, magic steps in. Specific runes, carved carefully into flesh around a wound, are believed to bind the injury and promote healing. The process is painful, knife cuts upon knife cuts, but many warriors swear by its effectiveness. Similarly, burns are treated with whispered charms, ancient words in the old tongue that are said to draw fire from flesh and replace it with cool healing. Blood is let from wrists to balance your humors, though no one agrees what those are. The theory of humors, blood, phlegm, yellow bile, black bile, filters north from classical medicine, but arrives garbled and confused. The wise women know that sometimes bleeding a patient helps, sometimes it kills, but they lack the theoretical framework to predict which outcome will occur. So they make their best guess based on the patient's symptoms, the season, the phase of the moon, and pure intuition. Sometimes a small cut on the wrist releases pressure and saves a life. Sometimes it just makes a weak patient weaker. The practice of bloodletting reveals the dangerous intersection of foreign learning and native tradition. Southern physicians claim that illness comes from imbalanced humors that must be drained away. Northern healers know empirically that bleeding sometimes helps, sometimes doesn't. When these two knowledge systems meet, the result is often a confused hybrid that combines the worst of both. The dangerous overconfidence of theory with the hit-or-miss uncertainty of folk practice. If you're rich, maybe a monk treats you with Latin words and trembling hands. Christian monasteries preserve fragments of classical medical knowledge, and some monks study healing alongside theology. But these learned men often know more about ancient texts than living patients. They can recite Galen's theories in perfect Latin while being utterly baffled by a simple sword cut. Their treatments rely heavily on prayer, holy water, and blessed relics, approaches that sometimes work through pure psychological effect, but just as often fail completely. The monks' trembling hands reveal their essential weakness. They've studied healing in books, not practiced it on battlefields. When faced with a real wound, real blood, real pain, their theoretical knowledge crumbles. They know what Hippocrates wrote about bone setting, but have never actually set a broken bone. They can quote biblical passages about healing miracles, but panic when confronted with actual medical emergencies. For all their learning, they often prove less useful than an experienced grandmother who's treated hunting accidents for 40 years. If you're poor, your fate is decided by bone dice and breathless prayers. Without gold to pay healers, without status to demand treatment, the common warrior must rely on luck and divine favor. Bone dice, carved from the knuckle bones of sacrificed animals, are cast to determine treatment, which herbs to use, when to apply them, whether the gods favor recovery. The randomness seems cruel, but it reflects the fundamental uncertainty of all healing in an age without understanding of infection, anatomy, or pharmacology. Prayer accompanies every treatment, whether Christian or pagan. The wise women mutter invocations to Ire, goddess of healing, while applying poultices. Christian monks chant Latin psalms while setting bones. Even the atheistic warrior whispers desperate bargains with whatever gods might listen when pain drives him beyond endurance. Prayer costs nothing and sometimes seems to help. Whether through divine intervention or psychological comfort, matters less than the simple fact that hopeful patients often recover better than despairing ones. And when the pain won't stop, you drink mead until the world softens, and wait to see if you wake. Alcohol is the universal anesthetic, the one reliable escape from agony that human chemistry can provide. Strong mead, aged ale, imported wine if you can afford it. Anything that can dull the sharp edges of pain and make suffering bearable. But alcohol is a dangerous medicine. Too little, and the pain remains unbearable. Too much, and you never wake up. The wise women know how to calculate doses, how to balance pain relief against poisoning, but even they make mistakes. Alcohol also serves as surgical anesthetic for the most desperate procedures. When an arrow must be dug from bone, when a limb must be amputated, when a deep wound must be cauterized, the patient drinks until consciousness fades. The surgeon works quickly while the patient lies insensible, racing against time before sobriety returns with renewed agony. Many warriors prefer to face surgery drunk rather than awake, not just for the pain relief, but because unconsciousness spares them the memory of their own screaming. To survive injury, you must be lucky. To survive illness, you must be blessed. And sometimes, survival just means not dying today. This harsh equation governs every aspect of Viking Age healing. Medical knowledge helps, but not enough. Skilled healers improve your odds, but can't guarantee success. Proper treatment matters, but fate matters more. In the end, recovery comes down to the fundamental resilience of your body, the favor of whatever gods you serve, and the simple biological lottery that determines who lives and who dies. The randomness of survival breeds its own philosophy. Warriors who live through terrible wounds develop a fatalistic acceptance of pain and injury. Scars become badges of honor, proof that you've danced with death and lived to tell the tale. Permanent disabilities, a stiff arm, a ruined eye, a twisted leg, mark you as a survivor rather than a victim. The northern mind learns to find glory in endurance, strength in persistence, victory in simple continuation. But this philosophy has its dark side. The same fatalism that helps warriors endure pain can prevent them from seeking proper treatment. Why waste gold on healers when fate determines all outcomes? Why endure the agony of surgery when death comes regardless? This attitude saves some warriors from quackery and harmful treatments, but it also kills others who might have been saved by proper care. The wise women understand this psychological dimension of healing. They know that patients who believe in recovery often do recover, while those who expect death usually find it. So, they mix hope with their herbs, confidence with their treatments, encouragement with their examinations. A healer who projects certainty and competence can sometimes cure through pure force of personality what medicines cannot touch. Yet even the most skilled healers acknowledge their limitations. They've watched too many strong warriors die from simple wounds, too many weak invalids recover from mortal injuries, to believe completely in their own abilities. They do what they can, use what they know, pray to whatever powers they trust, and accept that some battles cannot be won. In a world where medicine is more art than science, more faith than knowledge, sometimes the greatest healing wisdom is simply knowing when to let go. Section 13. The end of the old ways, the coming of the cross. Change doesn't knock, it invades. The transformation of the Viking world happens not in a single moment, but across generations. Like a tide that rises so slowly you don't notice until the water reaches your chest. The gods who witnessed your grandfather's first raid will watch your grandson's baptism, and the same runes that blessed your father's sword will be carved on your son's gravestone. This is not conquest in the traditional sense. No foreign army marches across your borders. No enemy fleet darkens your harbors. Instead, change seeps into your world through trade routes and marriage alliances, through practical politics and genuine conversion, through the simple human need to belong to something larger than yourself. The Christian God comes cloaked in Latin and wielding a cross like a sword. First, through merchants. The earliest Christians you encounter are not missionaries, but businessmen. Frankish traders who finger small wooden crosses while haggling over amber prices. Saxon merchants who mutter prayers in Latin before closing deals. Frisian intermediaries who carry both Thor's hammer and Christ's cross as insurance for profitable journeys. These men bring more than goods to your markets. They bring stories of a God who promises eternal life, of a Savior who forgives all sins, of a heaven where the worthy feast forever in halls greater than Valhalla. The merchant's Christianity is practical rather than theological. They've learned that Christian lands offer better trade opportunities, that Christian kings grant more favorable terms to fellow believers, that Christian merchants trust each other more easily across linguistic and cultural barriers. Their faith may be shallow, but their success is obvious. They grow rich while your traditional traders struggle with the changing dynamics of international commerce. This prosperity becomes its own form of evangelism. If the Christian God brings wealth, perhaps there's something to their religion after all. Then missionaries, men like Ansgar the Bold, who walks into your halls wearing simple robes and speaking your language, who knows your customs and respects your traditions while quietly undermining both. These are not the trembling monks of popular imagination, but sophisticated operators who understand that conversion requires more than preaching. They learn Old Norse, study your legal traditions, befriend your jarls, and slowly, carefully, begin the work of cultural transformation. The missionaries are subtle. They don't immediately demand that you abandon your gods. Instead, they suggest that Christ is simply the greatest of all gods, the one who rules over Thor and Odin as a king rules over his earls. They point to similarities between Christian and Norse mythology. Both traditions speak of a God who sacrificed himself for wisdom. Both envision a final battle between good and evil, Both promise reward for the brave and punishment for the cowardly. This syncretic approach makes Christianity seem less foreign, more compatible with existing beliefs. But compatibility is just the first step toward replacement. Once Christ is accepted as a God among gods, the missionaries begin arguing that he's the only God that matters. The others, Odin, Thor, Frey, are recast as demons, fallen angels, or simply powerless idols. What begins as addition becomes subtraction. What starts as inclusion becomes exclusion. What appears as tolerance becomes intolerance. The transition happens so gradually that you might not notice until your grandson asks why you still pray to false gods. Then kings, who wear crowns gifted by Rome. Political conversion proves more decisive than theological argument. When Harold Bluetooth converts to Christianity and forces his subjects to follow, the change isn't driven by spiritual revelation, but by practical politics. Christian kingdoms offer better trading relationships, more reliable military alliances, greater international legitimacy. A Christian king can marry his daughters to Frankish nobles, can appeal to the Pope for support against rivals, can access the diplomatic networks that increasingly define European politics. The political dimension of conversion creates complex motivations. Some kings genuinely believe in Christ's message and seek salvation for themselves and their people. Others see Christianity as a tool for centralizing power. Christian kingdoms tend to be more unified than pagan ones, more efficiently administered, more capable of sustained military campaigns. Still others convert simply because the alternative is isolation from the emerging European political system. A pagan king in a Christian world finds himself increasingly alone, unable to form the alliances necessary for survival. At first, the gods coexist. Odin watches while Christ bleeds. The early phase of Christianization often involves religious mixing rather than replacement. Christian and pagan symbols appear together on jewelry and weapons. Churches are built on the sites of old temples, incorporating familiar architectural elements and sacred locations. Christian holidays are timed to coincide with traditional festivals, making the transition easier for common people who measure their lives by seasonal celebrations. This religious syncretism creates fascinating hybrid forms. Thor's hammer pendants are worn alongside Christian crosses, sometimes combined into single pieces of jewelry. Runic inscriptions invoke both Christ and Odin, asking for protection from all available divine sources. Burial practices mix Christian and pagan elements. Bodies are interred in churchyards, but surrounded by grave goods. Crosses are carved on memorial stones that also bear runic inscriptions and mythological scenes. The coexistence period can last for generations. Families develop complex religious practices that honor both traditions. Christian prayers at meals, pagan rituals at harvests, theological arguments that attempt to reconcile competing mythologies. Children grow up bilingual in religious terms, equally comfortable with Latin hymns and skaldic poetry, able to navigate both Christian and pagan social expectations. But soon, you're told your gods are lies, that your ancestors burn in hell, that the runes are cursed, that your festivals are pagan filth. The gentle theological tolerance of early Christianity gives way to more aggressive orthodoxy as the Church consolidates its power. What was once presented as religious choice becomes religious obligation. Pagan practices that were initially tolerated are increasingly denounced as demonic. The gods who were once acknowledged as lesser deities are now condemned as devils who deceive and corrupt the faithful. This shift from tolerance to persecution doesn't happen overnight, but it's inexorable. Each generation of Christian leaders becomes more confident, more demanding, more intolerant of compromise. The priests, who once worked alongside pagan holy men, now demand their exile or execution. The kings, who once balanced Christian and pagan constituencies, now find political advantage in demonstrating their orthodox faith through persecution of the old religion. The psychological impact of this transformation can be devastating. Imagine being told that everything your ancestors believed was not just wrong but evil, that your grandfather, who died bravely in battle expecting Valhalla, is instead burning in eternal torment because he didn't accept Christ, that your mother's healing charms, passed down through generations of wise women, are actually demonic spells that damn both user and patient, that your most sacred traditions are abominations in the sight of the true God. Some convert to gain land. In the new Christian order, religious conformity becomes tied to political advancement. Land grants, trade privileges, marriage alliances, and military appointments increasingly require Christian identity. Ambitious men convert not from spiritual conviction, but from practical necessity. Maintaining pagan beliefs becomes a luxury they cannot afford. Their conversion may be shallow initially, but over time, especially as they raise Christian children, the practical becomes personal. Others, out of fear, the Christian hell presents a terrifying alternative to traditional afterlife beliefs. Norse paganism envisions various post-death destinations: Valhalla for heroes, hell for the ordinary dead, other realms for specific categories of people, but none involve eternal torture. Christianity introduces the concept of infinite punishment for finite sins, a theological innovation that can terrorize even brave warriors. Fear of damnation drives conversions that begin in terror but may eventually develop into genuine faith. Still others, out of genuine belief. Not all conversion is political or fearful. Some Vikings encounter Christianity and find it spiritually compelling. The message of universal salvation, the promise of divine forgiveness, the example of Christ's sacrificial love can speak powerfully to hearts prepared to receive it. These authentic conversions often produce the most dedicated Christians, men and women who embrace their new faith with the same intensity they once brought to warrior culture. But many resist. They carve Thor's hammer into their crosses. They baptize and still offer to Frey in secret. They call Christ another God, not the only one. Resistance takes many forms, from open rebellion to subtle subversion. Some communities simply refuse Christian missionaries, driving them away with threats or violence. Others accept surface Christianity while maintaining pagan practices in private, a dangerous game that can lead to accusations of witchcraft or heresy. The most common form of resistance involves religious camouflage. Pagan symbols are disguised as Christian ones. Thor's hammer becomes an abstract cross. Runic inscriptions are explained as decorative patterns. Traditional festivals are renamed after Christian saints. This strategy allows communities to maintain cultural continuity while avoiding persecution, but it also gradually transforms the traditions being preserved. After several generations of camouflage, the hidden pagan elements may become so attenuated that they lose their original meaning. Passive resistance also occurs through religious indifference. Some Vikings simply ignore both Christianity and paganism, focusing on practical concerns of survival and prosperity. while treating all religious claims with skepticism. This secular approach becomes more common as traditional religious certainties break down and competing truth claims cancel each other out. When every priest and every holy man claims exclusive access to divine truth, some people conclude that none of them know anything at all. But the old world is dying. Literacy comes with the monks, roads with the church, law with the king's writ. The institutional changes accompanying Christianization transform society as much as the religious ones. Monastic schools introduce widespread literacy, replacing the oral culture that preserved traditional knowledge. Written law codes supersede customary practices maintained by memory and consensus. Administrative systems based on Christian models create more centralized, bureaucratic forms of government. These institutional changes prove irreversible even when religious conversion remains incomplete. Once you have writing, you can't return to purely oral culture. The advantages are too obvious. The applications to numerous tapes. Once you have written law, customary practices seem arbitrary and uncertain by comparison. Once you have systematic administration, informal governance structures appear chaotic and inefficient. The tools of Christian civilization prove useful even to those who reject Christian theology. The economic dimensions of this transformation are equally significant. Christian kingdoms develop more sophisticated financial systems, more extensive trade networks, more advanced agricultural techniques. Monasteries become centers of technological innovation, preserving classical knowledge while developing new methods of production. The material prosperity associated with Christian civilization provides practical arguments for conversion that complement theological ones. Soon the sword is taxed, the warband is outlawed. Your axe becomes a symbol, not a tool. The warrior culture that defined Viking identity comes under systematic attack as Christian kingdoms establish monopolies on legitimate violence. Private warfare, once the defining activity of the warrior class, becomes illegal. Professional armies replace warrior bands, reducing martial skills from a universal requirement to a specialized occupation. The weapons that once marked you as a free man become restricted items that only licensed soldiers may carry. This demilitarization of civilian society represents a fundamental shift in social organization. Viking culture was essentially martial. Every free man was a potential warrior. Every household maintained weapons. Every community expected to defend itself. Christian feudalism concentrates military power in the hands of specialized nobles, while reducing commoners to peaceful dependence. The psychological impact of this change cannot be overstated. It transforms Vikings from wolves into sheep, from predators into prey. And your gods grow quiet. Perhaps the most poignant aspect of religious transition is the gradual silence of the old gods. They don't disappear in a single moment of dramatic confrontation, but simply fade away as fewer people call upon them. Fewer rituals honor them, fewer stories preserve their adventures. The gods who once spoke through omens and dreams, who manifested their power through natural phenomena and battlefield victories, seem to withdraw from a world that no longer believes in them. This divine silence creates its own theological problems. If the old gods were real, why don't they defend themselves against Christian encroachment? If they were false, why did they seem so powerful to previous generations? Different people answer these questions differently. Some conclude that the gods have been defeated by Christ. Others that they were always illusions, Still others that they've simply moved elsewhere and will return when needed. To survive this shift, you must adapt. Learn Latin, trade blessings for contracts. Raise your children with one foot in each world. Become not a Viking, but something else. A Dane, a Norman, a citizen. Successful adaptation requires accepting that the old world is gone and cannot be restored. The skills that served your ancestors, raiding warrior culture, pagan religious practices, become not just obsolete but dangerous in the new Christian order. Survival depends on developing new competencies, new identities, new relationships with power. Learning Latin becomes essential for anyone seeking advancement in the new order. Latin is the language of law, diplomacy, trade, and scholarship. Without it, you're excluded from the emerging European elite culture, confined to local concerns, while others shape the broader currents of history. The irony is striking. The same Vikings who once scorned book learning as weakness now find themselves dependent on literacy for basic social mobility. Trading blessings for contracts means abandoning the informal, personal relationships that governed traditional society in favor of formal legal arrangements that define Christian civilization. Where once your word and your reputation sufficed to seal agreements, now you need written documents, witnessed signatures, ecclesiastical approval. The handshake deals that bound Viking society give way to complex legal instruments that require professional interpretation. This shift from personal to institutional relationships fundamentally alters the texture of daily life. Raising children with one foot in each world becomes the great challenge of the transition generation. You want them to remember their heritage while succeeding in the new reality. You teach them the old stories, but also the new prayers. You pass down traditional skills, but also ensure they learn Christian virtues. You honor your ancestors while preparing your descendants for a future that will look nothing like the past. This cultural balancing act requires constant vigilance. Too much tradition, and your children become outcasts. Too much adaptation, and they become strangers. The identity transformation from Viking to Dane, Norman, or citizen involves more than changing names. It requires internalizing new values, new loyalties, new definitions of honor and success. The Viking who defines himself through warfare must become the Christian who defines himself through service to God and King. The raider who measures wealth in portable treasure must become the landowner who measures wealth in productive estates. The pagan who seeks glory in this world must become the believer who seeks salvation in the next. But never forget what you were. Even as you adapt to survive, maintaining connection to your origins becomes essential for psychological coherence. The traditions you abandon completely disappear forever. But those you preserve in modified form can continue to provide meaning and identity across generations of change. The key is distinguishing between essential cultural elements that must be preserved and superficial practices that can be safely discarded. But survival isn't just breath. Your physical body, strong as it may be, scarred as it has become, trained as it is for violence and hardship, represents only the most temporary aspect of your being. Flesh fails, bones break, blood spills, and cannot be restored. But the human capacity for creating meaning beyond mortality, for building monuments more durable than stone, for achieving a kind of immortality through memory and influence, offers something approaching eternal life for those wise enough to understand its mechanisms. Death stalks every Viking from birth to grave, but the fear of being forgotten proves more terrifying than the fear of dying. A warrior can face death with equanimity if he believes his deeds will be remembered, his name spoken with respect, his example inspiring future generations. But to die unmourned, unremembered, without impact, this is the true hell that haunts the northern mind. The concept of Valhalla itself represents an attempt to guarantee that heroic death leads to eternal significance, rather than oblivion. Its story, its legend, it's the rune carved into stone, the saga whispered over firelight, the bloodline that carries your stare 5 generations down. The primary vehicle for achieving immortality in Viking culture is narrative, the complex web of oral traditions, written records, and symbolic representations that preserve individual identity across the centuries. Every significant act you perform, every notable achievement you accomplish, every memorable failure you endure becomes raw material for the stories that will define your posthumous existence. Preservation systems ever developed by a pre-modern society. Professional storytellers, skalds, bards, chroniclers undergo years of training to memorize vast cycles of interconnected tales, genealogies, and historical accounts. They learn not just the stories themselves, but the techniques for embedding them in memorable forms, alliterative verse patterns that make forgotten lines obvious, narrative structures that aid recall, character relationships that provide context for isolated incidents. These oral archives contain more than entertainment. They preserve the legal, social, and cultural knowledge that holds society together. Saga tellers know who owes what to whom, which families are allied or feuding, what precedents govern unusual legal situations, which gods favor which activities. They serve as living libraries, walking databases, human repositories of everything their communities need to remember but cannot afford to forget. The transition from oral to written culture, accelerated by Christian influence, creates both opportunities and dangers for legendary preservation. Writing allows stories to be preserved exactly, without the gradual changes that affect oral transmission. But it also centralizes control over narrative in the hands of literate elites, usually Christian monks, who may have little sympathy for pagan heroes and their violent deeds. The same Vikings who lived larger-than-life existences may find themselves diminished or distorted when filtered through Christian scribes, who view their subjects as noble savages at best, demonic monsters at worst. Runic inscriptions represent a compromise between oral and written preservation, a distinctly Norse approach to immortalizing memory. Carved into stone monuments, these inscriptions serve as permanent markers of individual achievement and family pride. The language is necessarily compressed. Runic carving is laborious work that demands concise expression, but the messages they preserve cut to the essential elements of Viking identity: who you were, what you accomplished, how you died, who mourns your passing. The runes themselves carry magical as well as informational significance. Each symbol represents not just a sound or concept, but a cosmic principle, a divine force, a connection to the fundamental structures of reality. To have your name carved in runes is to participate in the same creative power that the gods used to shape the world from primordial chaos. The stone that bears your runic inscription becomes a point where your individual existence intersects with eternal cosmic forces. But runic monuments face their own preservation challenges. Stone endures longer than human memory, but not forever. Weather erodes inscriptions, political changes lead to monuments being destroyed or relocated. religious conversions result in pagan symbols being defaced or reinterpreted. Even the most carefully carved runestone represents only a temporary victory against oblivion, impressive in human terms, negligible in geological ones. Genetic inheritance ensures that some aspect of your physical being continues long after your death, while cultural inheritance passes down values, traditions, and behavioral patterns that preserve your influence across centuries. Children who share your features, grandchildren who display your temperament, great-grandchildren who exhibit your particular talents, all serve as living extensions of your existence. But genetic immortality comes with its own uncertainties. Bloodlines end through warfare, disease, or simple reproductive failure. Family traditions fade as circumstances change and new generations adapt to different realities. Physical resemblances become diluted through intermarriage with foreign populations. The stare that intimidated enemies on medieval battlefields may persist in the eyes of a modern descendant who has never held a weapon, never sailed beyond sight of land, never experienced the particular combination of freedom and danger that defined your existence. The Viking Age ends, but your imprint deepens. Cities bear your names, languages carry your words. The historical process that transforms Viking raiders into medieval kingdoms, that converts pagan warriors into Christian citizens, that replaces oral culture with written civilization, does not erase Viking influence, but rather embeds it more deeply into the emerging European system. The very forces that end the Viking Age also ensure its permanent integration into Western civilization. York, Kiev, these cities become centers of trade, culture, and political power that outlast the kingdoms that founded them. A modern resident of York may know nothing of Viking history, but they live daily with the consequences of decisions made by Norse settlers 1,000 years ago. The street patterns they established, the trade relationships they initiated, the cultural synthesis they created between Scandinavian and local traditions. Linguistic influence provides even more pervasive evidence of Viking impact. English contains hundreds of Norse loanwords, many representing fundamental concepts: sky, knife, husband, egg, they, their, them. These words didn't simply add vocabulary to English, they reshaped its grammatical structure, influenced its pronunciation patterns, altered its rhythm and flow. Every time an English speaker uses a Norse-derived word, they participate unconsciously in the cultural legacy of Viking settlement and conquest. The linguistic evidence reveals something profound about cultural transmission. The most lasting influences often operate below the level of conscious awareness. Political kingdoms rise and fall, religious systems replace each other. Military technologies become obsolete, but the basic vocabulary people use to describe reality persists across these changes. A modern English speaker who has never heard of the Viking Age still thinks partially in Norse categories every time they distinguish between shirt and skirt, between no and nay, between rear and raise. A century from now, children will fear your tales. The transformation of historical Vikings into legendary figures begins even during the Viking Age itself and accelerates after its end. The same process that converts living warriors into dead heroes also transforms human raiders into mythological monsters. Christian chroniclers emphasize Viking savagery to highlight the superiority of Christian civilization. Romantic writers emphasize Viking freedom to critique contemporary social constraints. Popular entertainers emphasize Viking adventure to provide escapist fantasy for mundane audiences. Each generation reinvents Viking imagery to serve its own psychological needs. Medieval Christians used Vikings as symbols of divine punishment for sin. Renaissance humanists used them as examples of natural nobility corrupted by paganism. Enlightenment philosophers used them as evidence of human progress from barbarism to civilization. Romantic poets used them as representatives of authentic emotion, unconstrained by artificial social conventions. Modern popular culture uses them as archetypes of masculine power, uncomplicated by modern anxieties. The legendary Vikings that emerge from this process bear only partial resemblance to the historical ones. They become larger, stronger, more violent, more free, more authentic than any real people could be. But this mythological exaggeration serves its own important function. It preserves essential aspects of Viking culture that pure historical accuracy might lose. The legendary Viking embodies qualities that resonate across cultural boundaries and historical periods: courage in the face of overwhelming odds, loyalty to chosen companions, willingness to risk everything for honor and adventure. 1,000 years from now, the world will study your ships and wonder how a people from frozen coasts nearly ruled the known world. The archaeological dimension of Viking survival offers perhaps the most objective form of immortality available to any historical culture. Unlike stories that change with each telling, unlike languages that evolve over time, unlike genetic inheritance that becomes diluted through intermarriage, physical artifacts preserve exact information about Viking technology, artistry, and daily life. Viking ships represent the most spectacular example of this archaeological preservation. The Oseberg ship, the Gokstad ship, the Skoldalov Rex. These vessels allow modern observers to understand Viking maritime technology with remarkable precision. We can measure their dimensions, analyze their construction techniques, calculate their performance characteristics, even replicate them for experimental archaeology. The ships that carried Vikings across unknown seas continue to carry information about Viking culture across the centuries. But archaeological survival creates its own interpretive challenges. The objects that survive are not necessarily representative of Viking culture as a whole. They reflect preservation conditions, burial practices, and pure chance as much as cultural significance. Metal artifacts survive better than organic ones. Elite grave goods better than common household items. Ceremonial objects better than everyday tools. The archaeological record provides a wealth of detailed information about Viking material culture, but this information comes pre-filtered by taphonomic processes that may distort our understanding of how Vikings actually lived. The question of how a people from frozen coasts nearly ruled the known world touches on one of the great puzzles of medieval history. The demographic mathematics seem impossible. Scandinavia's population was tiny compared to the region's Vikings raided and conquered. Their technological advantages, while real, were not overwhelming. Other cultures had ships, weapons, and military organization. Their political unity was minimal. Viking groups often fought each other as readily as they fought foreign enemies. Yet for several centuries, Viking influence extended from Greenland to Constantinople, from Ireland to Russia. They established kingdoms in England, France, Sicily, and Eastern Europe. They created trade networks that connected the Arctic with the Mediterranean, the Atlantic with the Black Sea. They served as mercenaries, diplomats, traders, and rulers throughout the medieval world. Their cultural influence shaped language, law, literature, and governance across Europe. The key to Viking success lay not in any single advantage, but in their unique combination of mobility, adaptability, and strategic thinking. Their ships allowed them to appear where enemies least expected them and disappear before effective resistance could be organized. Their decentralized social structure made them impossible to defeat through conventional military campaigns. There was no single capital to capture, no central authority to negotiate with, no unified command structure to disrupt. Perhaps most importantly, Vikings proved remarkably adaptable to local conditions. They could function as raiders when resistance was weak, traders when commerce was profitable, settlers when land was available, mercenaries when employment was offered, rulers when opportunity presented itself. This flexibility allowed them to exploit whatever advantages each situation provided, while avoiding the rigidity that trapped less adaptable cultures. You survive in bone, in ash, in myth. The multiple forms of Viking survival, physical, cultural, legendary, interact in complex ways that ensure their influence persists, even as its specific manifestations change over time. The bones discovered by archaeologists provide evidence for the myths preserved in literature, while the myths inspire new archaeological investigations that reveal previously unknown physical remains. Cultural traditions influenced by Viking contact preserve behavioral patterns that complement genetic inheritance from Viking settlers. This layered survival creates a kind of immortality more robust than any single preservation mechanism could provide. If the stories were forgotten, the genetic inheritance would remain. If the bloodlines ended, the cultural influences would persist. If the myths were debunked, the archaeological evidence would endure. If the physical remains were lost, the legendary traditions would continue. The redundancy built into this system of cultural transmission makes Viking influence virtually indestructible. It has survived the end of the Viking Age, the conversion to Christianity, the development of modern nation-states, and the transformation of European society through industrialization, democratization, and globalization. Because you lived hard, fought harder, and died so that your name would never be forgotten. The fundamental insight of Viking culture was that meaningful existence requires risk, struggle, and the willingness to sacrifice comfort for significance. A life spent in safety and ease might be pleasant, but it leaves no trace, nothing to remember, nothing to celebrate, nothing to inspire future generations. Only by pushing against the boundaries of the possible, by accepting danger in pursuit of glory, by choosing the difficult path when easier alternatives were available, could an individual hope to achieve the kind of immortality that Viking culture valued above all else. This philosophy of heroic existence created its own ethical framework. Courage became the supreme virtue, not because it was inherently good, but because it was necessary for achieving lasting significance. Honor mattered not as an abstract moral principle, but as the reputation that would survive bodily death. Loyalty was valued not for its own sake, but because it created the social bonds that preserved individual memory within group traditions. The Viking approach to mortality was fundamentally strategic rather than simply fatalistic. They accepted that death was inevitable, but refused to accept that meaninglessness was inevitable. Through careful attention to the mechanisms of cultural transmission, stories, monuments, bloodlines, influences, an individual could achieve a form of immortality that transcended biological limitations. This was not immortality in the Christian sense of eternal conscious existence, but immortality in the practical sense of permanent historical significance. The men and women who achieved this kind of immortality did so by understanding that survival operates on multiple levels simultaneously. Physical survival, staying alive day by day, was important but not sufficient. Cultural survival, ensuring that your values and traditions continued, was more significant but still incomplete. Represented the highest achievement available to human ambition. The Vikings who achieved legendary status did so not through accident but through deliberate choice. They selected actions that would be memorable, cultivated personalities that would be distinctive, created impacts that would be lasting. They understood intuitively what modern psychology has confirmed scientifically, that human memory preserves extreme examples better than average ones, dramatic events better than routine ones, emotional experiences better than purely rational ones. This understanding shaped everything from their personal behavior to their artistic expression. Viking poetry emphasized striking imagery, compressed narrative, and powerful emotional effects because these techniques made stories more memorable. Viking metalwork featured bold designs, intricate patterns. The result was a culture uniquely optimized for historical preservation. Every aspect of Viking civilization seemed designed to maximize its chances of surviving in human memory across the centuries, from their distinctive ships to their characteristic weapons, from their innovative legal systems to their sophisticated poetic traditions, from their adventurous exploration to their strategic settlement patterns. Vikings created a cultural legacy that was almost impossible to forget and nearly indestructible to eliminate. In the end, the question of what survives is also the question of what deserves to survive. The Viking Age produced much that was brutal, destructive, and morally questionable by any standard. But it also produced much that was admirable, innovative, and culturally valuable. But they are arguably the most essential ones. The characteristics that made Vikings uniquely themselves rather than generic medieval Europeans. The courage, the adventure, the willingness to risk everything for honor and achievement. The refusal to accept limitations imposed by geography or convention. The capacity to adapt and thrive in any environment. The loyalty to chosen companions. The respect for individual worth, regardless of birth circumstances. The integration of practical skill with artistic expression. These qualities continue to resonate because they represent possibilities for human flourishing that transcend any particular historical period or cultural context. Your legacy, then, is not just what you accomplished, but what you demonstrated was possible. Every Viking who sailed beyond the horizon proved that the world was larger than previous generations had imagined. Every Viking who established a kingdom in foreign lands proved that the accidents of birth need not determine the trajectory of life. Every Viking who chose honor over safety proved that meaning could be more valuable than survival itself. This is what survives. Not the specific details of individual lives, but the general example of how life can be lived. The particular battles fade into historical obscurity, but the courage they required remains eternally relevant. The specific kingdoms crumble into archaeological ruins, but the ambition that created them continues to inspire. The individual names disappear from popular memory, but the archetypal pattern they established, the transformation of ordinary people into legendary figures through extraordinary deeds, remains a permanent part of human cultural inheritance. In this sense, every Viking achieved immortality not through what they preserved of themselves, but through what they contributed to the expanding definition of human possibility. They survived not as individuals, but as part of a collective demonstration that life could be more than mere existence, that ordinary people could achieve extraordinary things, that the boundaries of the possible were far broader than most people dared to imagine, and that, perhaps, is the most meaningful form of survival available to any human being. To have lived in such a way that the example of your existence expands the horizons of what others believe they can achieve, in demonstrating what was possible for people of their time and place. Vikings demonstrated what remains possible for people of any time and place who possess sufficient courage, determination, and vision to pursue their own version of legendary existence. Thank you for watching No Sleep, Historian, where the past doesn't whisper, it howls. If you made it this far, you've survived more than just the Viking Age. You've seen the cold truth of history, stripped of glory, soaked in blood. Subscribe, because the next time period might be worse.